everyone. I'm Hui Chao from the National Institute of Education, NIE in Singapore. Thank you for joining today's webinar. 90 minutes is not a long time, but the topic today is huge. How to bring therapy into the classroom. Effective teaching and learning for all young children in everyday preschool activities. And I don't want to do a one-way lecture. I am eager to know what you think as much as you want to know what I think. So today, let's go through the agenda, and I'm going to tell you how we can interact with each other in this webinar. First, I would like to have a mutual introduction with each other so we know who's in the audience and we know the background for this discussion. Do you see this www.menti.com link and code on top of the slide? The code is 18672602. If you open any digital device, your laptop, your phone, or your iPad, you go to www.menti.com and you enter the code for this survey, 18672602. You can join the introduction session with me and let everybody know where you're coming from and your experiences. All right, please start the survey now. After I introduce myself, I'm going to share the results with everyone. So do you also see a QR code on this slide on the right side? This is a QR code for you to download the slides I'm using today if you want. And also I'm going to show this QR code throughout the webinar. So whenever you want the slides, you can just download it. There is no rush. After this introduction, we are going to take a look at the landscape of preschool inclusion in Singapore, because it's necessary for us to be on the same page about the context before we discuss the topic. Then I'll touch base on several key terms, things that I believe are very necessary to successful preschool inclusion. Today, we are very lucky because we have an honored guest speaker, Dr. Xie from PCF Sparkletots Preschool. She will be sharing some stories of how inclusive education is being delivered in some Singaporean preschools. Throughout the webinar, these 90 minutes, please use the Q&A section on Zoom to let us know if you have any questions, make comments, and share your stories. Your active participation is highly appreciated. Okay, so go to menti.com and let us know who you are. Download the slides using the QR code and let us know your questions in the Q&A box. Wow, you have a lot to do. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Guangzhou, China, a city of 13 million people near the South Coast, where I completed my undergrad degree and then a master's degree in early childhood education. Then I went to the United States. I got a teaching license and a Doctor of Philosophy degree before I came to Singapore and work at NIE. By the way, you will hear this acronym NIE many times because NIE is the host of this webinar and my boss. As an early childhood educator, then as an interventionist, I practiced in a variety of preschool classrooms, all the way from one end where there are self-contained classrooms. The students, the children need all kinds of equipment and individualized supports. There are more adults than children in the classroom. To some classrooms, they are more specific for children with autism. So 5 children in the same classroom, they all have all kinds of different levels of autism. And also to the other end of the spectrum, where there are a lot of children in the same classroom, and if you walk into this classroom and you observe for the whole day, you cannot figure out which kid in this classroom is receiving special education support, because all the interventions are fully integrated into everyday preschool activities. And from these experiences in the field, they have trained me very well in terms of understanding the complexity in reality, which is, I believe, absolutely critical to anyone who wants to bring substantial and sustainable improvements to schools. Once I become an academic, it's just natural that in my research projects, I always focus on questions raised from the field, such as how to implement naturalistic interventions in schools and how to follow this activity-based approach to early intervention, and use the AEPS assessment, evaluation, and programming system to identify learning goals and develop individualized learning plans. I have been very lucky to have worked with many brilliant scholars, such as Dr. Diane Bricker and other ones. Dr. Diane Bricker developed the AEPS system, and we just published a book this year focusing on the history of early intervention, early childhood special education in the United States. And this is a product of our recent collaboration. But anyways, this is just a snapshot of what I have been doing. I am very interested in knowing what you have been doing and why you are interested in this topic today. So let's switch the screen and take a look at your responses to our survey. Tell Hui Chao about yourself. First of all, I have to find this survey on my screen. Wow, look at that. We have received 45 responses so far. We see that 24 of you are teaching, you are teaching teachers or teacher candidates. So you are training teachers. 21 of you are teaching children, and there are 10 researchers, 8 administrators, and also 9 of you are teaching parents. And we have 10 of you who are doing other kinds of jobs. This is quite a wide range of jobs that you're doing, but I'm happy to see so many people are interested in the topic today. Next, how about the children's age that you're working with? I see a big trunk here. 20 of you said you work with children 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 or 3 to 7. This is an age range for, in Singapore, it is the preschool and kindergarten age. And then in some other countries, it may be the preschool age for 3 to 5 and 5 to 6 is the kindergarten age. So anyways, this is called a preschool education age range. It's the biggest trunk for today. Some of you are working with younger children, 0 to 5, and some of you are working with none of the above. So maybe you are not working with children. And how about the experiences you have in early childhood intervention? I see 20 of you told me that you are or you were a professional in early childhood intervention. For example, inclusive preschool teachers, interventionists, therapists, and psychologists. And some of you, you are working in a government branch. Welcome, policymakers. We really appreciate your participation and hear the voices from the field. And some of you are not currently working in early childhood intervention, but you have worked with intervention professionals. So great, what a big group of people from different backgrounds. And I am so excited today because you are all carrying in your different experiences, different lessons. And I believe those are important and strong assets for our discussion today. All right, let's get back to our agenda today. Well, now let's take a look at the early intervention landscape in Singapore. As you can see in this figure, we have the early intervention centers. We call them the EPIC centers or IPIC centers. People call it different ways. So these are the intervention-only centers. We have 21 of them across the country here. And then we have lots of community preschools in Singapore. Singapore parents love to send their kids to preschools. We have a very high preschool enrollment rate. So a lot of children who need intervention, they are also enrolled in a community preschool, which is very good. And in the preschools, we have increasing programs, service models to support different needs of children. For example, we have the DSP, developmental support programs. We have the DS Plus to help children who have been attending to the EPIC intervention centers and who are now currently ready to move on into the preschool settings. And we have some ICCP programs in some preschools, as well as there are therapies provided in clinics and hospitals. There are quite a large different kinds of programs providing intervention services for young children in Singapore. But this is not all of them, because I can't tell you how excited I was 4 years ago when I first came to Singapore, and I realized that the Singapore early intervention landscape is rapidly changing all the time, because we are our government is rolling out new programs all the time. So as you can tell, Dr. Poon and I published this diagram, this figure in 2019, and we have to update it now, because just in March 2021, our government announced a new initiative, which is to roll out inclusion coordinators to all preschools in Singapore. This inclusion coordinator will be in charge of identifying and supporting children with developmental needs in our local Singapore preschools. Isn't that amazing? I think this is a very nice, good news for everybody who cares about early childhood intervention. I just posted the link for this new initiative in our chat box. If you want to know more about this new program, feel free to check it out. Okay, so early childhood intervention services in Singapore are rapidly developing and expanding. And this is an exciting time for us, but it is not without challenges. One of these challenges is, how do we bring therapy into the classroom? I noticed that there are more people joining the audience now. If you didn't hear that, I'm going to remind you, there is this QR code on almost every single slide for you to download the slides I'm using today. So you don't have to take screenshot, you don't have to use your phone to take pictures. Just go to this Google Drive and download the slides. And while today we're talking about this topic, how to bring therapy into the classroom, many young children need all kinds of specialized supports in order to thrive and to learn and develop in our preschool setting. These kind of specialized supports can be interventions, they can be therapies, or just to do adaptations to the environment or to the curriculum. And these kind of specialized supports are highly individualized, which makes them a little bit different from the traditional approach of early childhood education. I was trained in early childhood education. I know that as a preschool teacher, you have to work with a whole class of 20, 30 young children, and you have very limited time and resources to focus just one child. So how do you deliver those individualized, highly specialized practices in a classroom setting? How do we incorporate the practices, the strategies, principles from therapies, from psychologists, from behavioral specialists, all these different people trained in different disciplines? How do we bring them into the same preschool classroom to serve the children? That's the topic we are trying to discuss today. Well, before we dive into talking about how to do something, I think it is absolutely necessary for us to first clarify on our goal, how to do something. So what is this something? So I would like to spend a little time to take you through a vision that I have about inclusive preschool classroom. What kind of classroom that I walk in would make me feel like this is a real inclusive classroom? I'm going to tell you my vision about that. And if you share similar visions, feel free to type 1 in the chat box. You see the chat box on Zoom? If you don't see that, feel free to click your Zoom toolbar, and there are 3 dots on the right side, more, and you can find the chat box. Oh, wait, wow, there are people already typing, thanks. So you can find a chat box, and if you put 1 into the chat box, I know you shared a similar vision with me as I go through my vision. And if you don't agree with me, that's totally fine. If you have other visions, feel free to type in the chat box or to make a comment in the Q&A box and let us know, all right? So my vision of an inclusive classroom is like this. It is a place where individualized, specialized interventions and therapies are integrated into the classroom activities. So if I walk into a classroom where children with special needs are being pulled out of the classroom for therapies, I would start wonder, is this a real inclusive classroom? I'm not sure, because I expect to see a lot of the individualized instructions should be embedded into whatever is going on in the classroom. When the kids are lining up for toilets, when they are washing their hands, when they are sharing snacks, when they are doing learning centers, doing art and crafts, doing circle time, whatever activities they are doing, the individualized learning goals and interventions and therapies should be embedded and incorporated in it. That's my first looking point for an inclusive classroom. The second thing I'm looking for is that all children engage in developmentally appropriate interactions with whom? With the environment, with adults, as well as with peers. If I don't see very positive and engaging, meaningful interactions between peers with and without disabilities, I also wonder, what can we do differently in this classroom to make it more inclusive? So this is the second point in my vision. And also a very important piece in my vision is that I expect to see a team of professionals from multiple disciplines like speech therapies, occupational therapies, psychologists, early interventionists, early childhood teachers, sometimes even parents or behavioral specialists. They all come from different disciplines and different backgrounds, but they collaborate and work together, and they do co-planning. Sometimes they deliver instructions collaboratively, and sometimes they do evaluations collaboratively. Anyways, I expect to see a team of professionals from multiple disciplines on board for this to support this classroom. Thank you for responses to my vision. I see lots of people in the audience share the same vision, and they type 1 in the chat box. Thank you. So with this vision, now we are more or less sharing the same goal. Then how do we get there? Well, here I want to share a very, really boil it down to the bone plan for you. That's, as research literature suggested, this is the very essential components that approaches to a real inclusive preschool classroom. I'm just going to selectively focus on 3 pieces today. If you have taken any of my courses, you know my style. Usually, I do not stop at 3 things. I may stop at 30 or 300, but not 3. But today, we only have 90 minutes. So I really have to limit to a very limited scope. So I really have to figure out what are the necessary, indispensable things in an inclusive classroom practice. That if missing one of these pieces, it's not going to work. So here are the 3 pieces I want to focus today. The first one is embedding learning opportunities, ELOs. The second thing is human diversity education. And then the third piece is multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. All right, I'll go through these 3 pieces now. Well, for those who join later, there's a QR code on almost every single slide for you to download the slide I used today. So you will see the QR code coming back all the time. All right. So when I walk into this preschool classroom that claims to be inclusive, I am first looking for embedding learning opportunities. Let's call them ELOs. If I see children being pulled out, I wonder whether this is a real inclusion, because ELO means we address children's learning goals inside the classroom. This intervention and therapies should be embedded as an integral and meaningful part of what is going on in the classroom schedule. Here's an example to show you how ELO looks like for Debbie in her preschool classroom activities. Like, for example, there is music, movement, there's story time, English lessons, snacks, learning centers. You can see this Debbie's learning goal is to learn to select an activity or object when given a choice. And the teachers embedded this goal throughout all kinds of activities in the classroom for Debbie. So it provides plenty of opportunities for Debbie to practice this skill, right? If this is a simple example, very straightforward, I want to show you a more complex system when we work with a whole classroom of 20, 30 young children in the classroom. This is an example from my own teaching experiences when I was a preschool teacher at a constructivism preschool. And we used an inclusive model. So out of the 22 children in the classroom, 4 of them have had individual learning goals. And this table is just a simplified version of a table of 3 pages that as a classroom teacher, I developed for them to guide through my everyday lesson planning and practices and teaching in the classroom. Because like you can see, for child R, child L, child O, and child G, those are the 4 children in that classroom that needed interventions and individualized instructions. And they each had their own little learning goals. Some have 2 goals, some have 1 goal. And I embedded all these goals into the classroom activities throughout the day, trying to maximize the learning opportunities for them and to help them generalize all those new skills in a natural context. As you can see, using embedding learning opportunities, ELOs, require quite a lot of planning. Why do we want to do so much work? Because here are the benefits as indicated in the literature. For children who need interventions and therapies, embedding learning opportunities help them learn new skills in the context where the skills are used, and to learn functional skills in preschool activities. And they also feel belonging as a member of the classroom, not being pulled out all the time. And for children who have disabilities, they need lots of repetition in learning. So these ELOs provide multiple and varied opportunities for them to practice and improve. Also, children are more likely to develop positive interactions and relationships with the peers because they are engaged in the same activities. And by engaging in the classroom activities as much as possible, children are also being involved in the school culture. These are the benefits for children by using ELOs. How about for families? What are the benefits for families if you use ELOs for their children? By using ELOs, families get to work together with teachers and therapists, and there is consistency there instead of families trying to incorporate different suggestions and advices from therapies here, and there is another specialist there, and then classroom teachers are telling different things. By embedding all the interventions or a lot of interventions and learning goals in the classroom, families can enjoy the consistency of services. Also, their child learns functional skills and are more able to apply the skills in daily life because they were learned in daily life. Families are being involved in the child's learning and generalization because lots of the ELOs can be embedded into home-based activities. And also families' ideas and views are validated because in order to plan for ELOs, our interventionists and professionals really need to learn from the families and to try to make plans for doing the intervention in natural settings. Those are the benefits for families. And then for teachers, for preschool classroom teachers, there are also a lot of advantages. How is it covered by? Oh, okay. So I'm going to adjust the view so that everybody can see the slides very well. All right. Let me see. Okay. Sorry about the technical issue. All right. So for classroom teachers, how do you benefit from using ELOs? Classroom teachers, they can strengthen their efficacy because in the traditional approach where children getting pulled out of the classroom for therapies and interventions, classroom teachers can feel like, oh, I'm not good enough to teach children who need intervention, who need specialized supports. Maybe because I'm not trained to teach them. Maybe I should just leave them to the specialist lab. Well, that's a negative impact on classroom teachers' efficacy. So by embedding the instructions into classroom activities, classroom teachers feel empowered and more confident that they can support those children who need specialized resources. And also, it improves classroom teachers' quality of teaching because research has pointed out again and again that classroom teachers, what they learned about how to teach children with disabilities, they would naturally generalize those pedagogies and teaching practices onto helping other children with typical development in the classroom. So the whole teaching quality can be enhanced. And also, it helps classroom teachers to build a cohesive team with therapists and families because they have to exchange information and they have to co-plan and co-implement their plans. And for classroom teachers, embedding lots of specialized supports in the classroom will give them also a good idea, a good sense about how children are going to perform and function in a primary classroom setting in the future so that they can plan for the transition, what is needed for the transition, what they can teach the child right now, so children will be successful in a primary classroom. Those are the benefits for classroom teachers, but it is also beneficial for specialists like early interventionists or therapists, because using ELO helps therapists to collaborate and build relationships with caregivers. And it helps to provide suggestions for daily activities and routines that in the past, the therapists and interventionists might not have the opportunity to provide suggestions. And also the therapists can identify ways to modify and adapt the natural environment in the classroom and to collect authentic data about the child's performances and functions in a natural setting. Also, not just classroom teachers are getting better in teaching by using ELOs. Our therapists and specialists, they also grow a bigger repertoire of skills because they need to embed the intervention strategies into everyday classroom activities. So those are the benefits of using ELOs, embedding learning opportunities as suggested in the literature. All right, let's say we have installed ELOs in the classroom. All children are receiving the support they need to fully engage in everyday learning in the classroom. Phew, is that all? Not yet. Have you seen this picture in a preschool classroom where children with and without special needs, they rarely play together. They rarely talk with each other. Please type 2 in the Zoom chat box if you have seen this. Even if our teachers are being very passionate, very caring, no one has taught the children to discriminate against someone or to exclude someone, but children just naturally do not blend together. Why? Because placing children with different needs in the same classroom does not naturally or automatically result in positive peer interactions and relationships. Children need to learn how to respectfully and effectively interact with peers who are different from themselves. If you are from the local schools, preschools in Singapore, you may have noticed that the goals in human diversity education that I'm going to talk about are very similar with the 21st century competencies as specified by the Singapore Ministry of Education in Singapore. Now let's take a look at what it is, human diversity education. Have you ever seen that being done in a preschool classroom? It is the second most important component approach that I want to introduce today among the three. So human diversity does not limit to having disabilities or not having disabilities. It is a very broad umbrella that covers many aspects in which people are different from each other, such as family composition. Some families have only one parent. Some families, there are parents, there are grandparents, there are aunties, uncles. Culture, language in Singapore, it is a huge thing. And age, ethnicity, belief, socioeconomic status, etc. The purpose of human diversity education is to facilitate children's construction of positive identity, learning how to interact with individuals different from themselves in a respectful and empathic ways, to be able to recognize biases and stand up to injustice. So, as you can see, inclusive education is never just supporting and benefiting children with special needs. The term inclusive means all children are included and being supported. So this foundation of multi-tiered systems of support is critical to the successful inclusion in a classroom. Now I'm going to show you a very, very brief snapshot of the MTSS framework. In order to go into the details and just quickly go through everything, I need 13 weeks, a whole semester of classes. But today, just do a snapshot of that. Children's needs, not children themselves, are categorized into 3 tiers, 1, 2, 3 tiers. The intensity and frequency of support increase from tier 1 all the way up to the top tier 3. And also the scope of coverage is also getting more and more focused as the tiers goes up. The bottom universal support tier applies to high quality curriculum and positive relationships that cover all children. Everybody needs that. For a small group of children, they also need tier 2 focus supports on top of the high quality curriculum and relationship. And then for a handful of children who struggle with some basic learning and basic skills, like they need speech therapy, or they have to establish approaches to learning. For those children, they need highly individualized supports at the 3rd tier. This MTSS model provides a solid foundation for inclusive education because it does not single out one child by his or her special needs. Instead, this model ensures all children are receiving the supports needed, and it allows movement across the tiers. You see the ring? That's data-driven decision-making that I have been teaching a lot of our teachers from MOE, that how to collect everyday data to drive your decision about what level of support that this specific student needs. So data-driven decision-making is a process to allow children's needs to move from tier to tier. And we all know that in early childhood, children's needs change all the time. So it is a very necessary system. I hope this very brief introduction to the essential building blocks of preschool inclusion makes sense to you. Now I'd like to invite more thoughts from you. In your experiences, either professional or personal, what barriers have you seen that are making it difficult to implement the building blocks, ELOs, human diversity education, MTSS? And as a result, making a preschool classroom less inclusive than we expect it to be. Please use this Menti.com survey. The code is 43065615. Use this new survey and tell us what you think about the barriers to preschool inclusion. We are going to go back to this survey later, but you'll see in this survey, I just come out of the literature and come out from my experiences in Singapore. I propose 6 barriers I've seen in Singapore preschools. The subsidized programs are not available in some preschool. And there are some preschools complain to me that the funding is limited for hiring people and for doing all the adaptations and making modifications and for allocating therapy services. And some preschools told me that even with the money, they don't know where to find the personnel, where to find the professionals they need. And some preschools complain that there are differences in the curriculum that they are using and the EPIC centers are using. So when children are attending EPIC Center and a preschool at the same time, maybe some children go to an EPIC in the morning and go to a preschool in the afternoon. The preschool told me that it's very difficult to align with the curricula or what is going on in the EPIC Center. And some said evaluation of efficacy is very difficult. They don't know what they've done, whether it is effective or not. They don't know how to keep track of the efficacy. And also some principals and teachers told me that people's attitudes and beliefs are getting into the way. Some parents are not supporting their efforts, and some teachers are being hesitating in the innovations, and some policymakers also maybe have a different mindset. So anyways, those are the 6 options that I provide. You can also check the other barriers and then move to the next page to describe other barriers. Please do this survey in the rest of the webinar. We are going to reflect on it time to time regularly. So now let's welcome our honored guest speaker, Dr. Honey Ng from PCF Sparkletots Preschool. She's bringing in some amazing stories about how inclusive preschool education is being implemented in the preschools in Singapore. Welcome, Dr. Honey Ng.
Hi, thank you so much for the welcome, and I'm so happy to have this opportunity to speak to such a varied group of professionals and participants. First off, I understand that there are also some guests from overseas, so I like to put what I'm going to share in context. First, we are PCF is a preschool for children from 2 months to 6 years. 1 in every 5 child in the school-going age attend PCF. So children below 6 years, 6 and below. And because of that, we have this wonderful opportunity to be working with a range of children, a range with developmental needs and learning needs. I have a small team that visits the preschool to work with the wonderful teachers and principals there. And today, I like to share just 3 stories. And these are, for me, these are all work towards inclusion. We can only continue our journey to be more inclusive and to make or to help the ideal help the ideal of all children working, playing, and enjoying themselves together. The first, and these are children whom I have come across or seen their the work of the teachers, the interventionists, the therapy team, and it touched me. And I thought this is a wonderful place to share that. The first is a child who was who enrolled with us sometime last year, and actually just a month before circuit breaker, and he was diagnosed with autism. When he came to us, he was nonverbal. He was also presenting with repetitive behavior, and he was also disengaged. So Hui Chao mentioned and talked about in including children, you want to make sure their engagement, and his disengagement is also from the fact that he was having problem. He was working with regulating himself. So Kim's the circuit breaker, we all had to be at home. But when circuit breaker was lifted, the mom and dad was really excited to get him started on intervention. He was considered moderate to severe, and as such, because of the restriction in place everywhere, where for children going into the EPIC, it was priority to give to children with severe needs first, of course. So we then quickly came together. The center principal with the teachers were wonderful. They came together with our inclusive education team, and they started to look at what were the environmental adaptation that needed to take place to help this child focus better, to help him manage and regulate himself in the classroom, to help him know where he needs to go, where he needs to be. So we use a lot of visual cues to guide him, and also to also reduce his anxiety. Remember, he's just coming back to school that he only spent a month in, and then the second thing that was done was also to use visual cues for engaging the child to understand his visual cards, to understand his needs, and to communicate with the teachers. So these were embedded. So we first do the environmental adaptation, and then we did the embedding of his needs to improve his verbal communication via visual cards through his regular functional everyday activity, like having a snack. So instead of pointing or pulling someone's hand, he has to then show the card on what he wanted. So it was a very visual. It was a visual card or cue for him to communicate, and our teachers then were able to also reciprocate, and they started using visual cards for communication. And this was also in line with what the EPIC Center planned for him. The other thing that was very intentional was looking at what were the goals that were set for him, his individualized educational goals, and embedding this in his in our large group activity, and also in the planning of his transition. Just as I explained, using the snack time as a visual communication, as a communication practice. So that was done for him. And if you imagine the child who just came to school, not settled and having a difficult time, because he has needs, he needed help, and he had moderate severe needs. So he was quite fast around the class. And within 3 weeks, the center principal together with the teacher and our IT team members were working to him, and he was able to be quite managing on task 80% of the time. And so that was totally head off for this group. The other thing was, of course, the parents were involved. The parents understood right from beginning. We were using visual cards and what they need to do and what they need to practice with him at home too. So everyone in the community worked together to help him settle into the class, and also practice the skills he needs to learn within the classroom. The second, I want to consider more like work in progress. Second great story would be a particular child with global developmental delay coming in with other physical issues, and she is currently attended by the EPIC Center. And when we were asked to also look at some equipment to see we could bring in for the child, bearing in mind the IEP goals set by the Early Intervention Center, we then look at what we could do for the child. And one of those things was she was presenting as no tone. She was also not walking when she's supposed to be walking. So the therapist visited, our therapist went in, helped him for once a month, put him on K walker. With that, she started to also lose weight because it's really natural. She's exercising a little bit more, and 4 months down the road, the child is functionally moving, independently moving from with assistance from one area to another. So that was very exciting for us to see that happening as we work with the EPIC centers on the goals. And the other bit was that this child didn't have verbal communication again, and it's way she's not meeting her developmental milestone. And what was very, very exciting was that the whole center took it upon themselves, all the teachers and principals took it upon themselves to learn keyword sign. She is on keyword sign, and they then started to make sure that they were able to sign the basic words. And 4 months down the road, when you enter the room, you enter a very different room because you can see that she is communicating her needs and her wants, and she is very loud about it. And we still have some more steps to go. But I wanted to share this because it's really the whole village, a whole village. She not only can communicate her needs or wants or thoughts using keyword signs, so you know it's a bit limiting though, but she's also communicating to her friends with the signing. The third is really about a profile, presenting profile of children with maybe more anxious behavior, so they appear a bit, they appear like they are very shy, a bit more quiet, not interacting as much with friends, most of the time watching by the side. Sometimes when you ask question in the classroom, you know the child can articulate the answer, but the child is not communicating it. For whatever reason, the child is speaking at home, but not communicating, say in the school or in other places. So I have seen often cases like this. The teachers, the therapists working with the child can help bring the communication goals to its fruition really well, from say pointing a non-verbal communication method to mouthing, then maybe very soft whisper, and then maybe louder whisper, and then hopefully more natural speech. And you can see that extension when that's done, where the teachers might be working with the child and his or her best friend, and then that audience grow to maybe 2 friends, 3 friends, and then in the large group. So when you see that happening, you can see the success of that intervention. The other part of it would be during this time, normally they would then try to, the therapists or the early interventionists would work really hard to bring the socially appropriate skills into play, and use the opportunities in the classroom to demonstrate that. So, for instance, how to join the play, learning what to say, to initiate a conversation with your friends, how to take turns, which we we kind of sometimes assume that it happens naturally, but for children, as Hui Chao mentioned just now, it's not necessary. It's not automatically. We need to introduce that too, and how to maybe learn some of the non-verbal behavior that others are showing and what that means and whether that is inviting or not inviting. So these are some really wonderful, easy to manage intervention work that you can do together with the therapist that you're working with your children with, or your in-house therapist or early intervention team like we do have in PCF. Okay, I think I've taken sufficient time. Leave Hui Chao to do the Q&A portion.
Thank you so much for the fruitful discussions today. I hope we have touched base on your questions and your comments. And if you have further questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And I'm going to flip back to the slide showing my contact information, or you can go to NIE website to look for my page on NIE. If you search Hui Chao Xie NIE, you will see my page on NIE. And feel free to contact us anytime you want to discuss the topic of inclusive education in preschools. Thank you for your time and participation. I had a good time today. I hope everyone is going to enjoy the weekend. Yay! Bye-bye.